Great. Thanks, Amanda. Can everyone hear me here? Perfect. It's really nice to be here with you all today. As Amanda said, I'm Megan. I'm the co-founder, the founder, and the creative director of Studio Mesh. And I'm gonna just get my screen sharing on here. Working through two computers here today. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so I'm Megan. I'm the creative director at Mesh, and I, as Amanda mentioned, have the privilege of working with Ophma over the last couple years on a lot of different work, from a rebranding to map design to teaching some other workshops like this. We also were able to work with Ophma to create a digital campaign in 2020 when we needed to, when farmers markets needed to pivot online. Before that, we've been around for 10 to 12 years now, and we worked with markets and associations all over the country, and we've done a lot of work with food justice in places in urban settings throughout New York City and Detroit, and also in very rural places like in West Virginia and Appalachia. So it's been a real privilege to bring that experience to Oregon and to be able to learn more about your food systems in Oregon and think about how we can take what we know with branding and marketing and help tell the stories of farmers markets in Oregon. So today we're really excited to launch the brand and marketing toolkit that we've been working on. My team's been working on for quite a while. So it's now available and live on the Ophma website. I'm going to go through a demo of that today. And yeah, we're really excited to share the first few chapters with you, and we'll be releasing a series of different chapters over the next 2 years. So you'll have continued ongoing learning experiences through Ophma. So, and I just want to ask my co-hosts here, I'm getting requests for folks to join. Madeline, are you seeing those as well? Are you able to manage those?
Yeah, we're taking care of those.
Okay, great. All right, I just wasn't sure. Okay, perfect. So, so the first 30 minutes today, we have 90 minutes together, and our first 30 minutes here, I'm just going to give kind of an overview of what branding and marketing is. Has anyone here, did anyone attend the workshop that I taught last year? If you did, could you give a raise of hand in the video? Or do we have all new faces here? Okay, we got one or two folks. So in the first half hour here, I'm just going to give an overview of branding and marketing. So some of this may not be new to you if you've been to one of my sessions before. In the second 30 minutes, we're going to look at the toolkit online, and I'm going to give a demo, and we're going to explore all the different resources available to you now through Ophma. And then in our last 30 minutes today, we'll do some Q&A, and we can do an exercise if we want to, running through how this information, how brand strategy and marketing could actually be applied to your farmer's market. So let's see here. So yeah, so this is me. You've already met me. And my company is called Studio Mesh. These are all the things that we do: branding, web design and development, print design, campaigns, packaging, content strategy, environmental design. We work interdisciplinary across mediums with mostly social impact companies and nonprofit organizations across the country and really internationally. This is some of our work. You can visit our website at meshfresh.com. You see our Ophma logo there. We're very proud of the work we've done with you all. And yeah, so let's get into it today. So, so what is a brand? So we think of branding, often people think of branding as like big corporate brands, Apple or Target, these big corporations that are almost like they're larger than life. But really, the way that we think of brands at our company is that brands are identities. So just like you have your own identity as a person, you have your name, you have your signature, you also have all the different things that make up who you are, right? You have your value system, the things that you care about, your interests. And then you also have physical attributes, some that never change, they're constants in your life, and some that change and evolve through time with different styles and trends and time periods. So all of our identities have consistent elements and flexible elements to them. And so we think of brands just like that. Brands are identities that we create that are flexible personalities. So Identity 101. So the unique, cohesive compilation of your name, culture, personality, reputation, perception, ideals, and values. So all of these things are core tenets to your identity, just like they're core tenets to the identity or the brand of a farmer's market. The three things that we think about, the way that we design brands, we think of the visual part of the branding, the verbal part, and the experiential part. So the visual part, you can think about the analogy of who you are, all the visuals that make you up. Visual branding includes the color palette that you use, the font or the typography. All typography has a personality to it, and it makes people feel different ways, just like color makes people feel different ways, and it communicates different things. Your logo. So a lot of people think of branding just as a logo, but the logo is just like your signature. Your signature is an important part of you, but it's not that symbol doesn't tell the whole story of who you are. Photography, imagery, illustration, and style are all parts of your visual branding. Your verbal branding is your brand name. It's like your market name. The messaging, the way that you talk about your market, your value system, and also brand words. So words that you use often that help communicate your values and reinforce those to folks. And then the third tenet is the experiential brand. So this is the experience people have when interacting with your brand, either in person, so for you all at a market, on site, or also online digitally. So all of those we think of as the experience that people have when they're speaking with a vendor, when they're speaking with a market manager, when they're interacting online with the information you're sharing. That's all the experience. So when we think of a well-crafted brand, we think of something that inspires people, that grows and is flexible and evolves as your organization or your market moves forward. A well-crafted brand also creates strong, authentic relationships with the people that you serve. So you're not just thinking about your identity, but you're thinking about the people that you're connecting with. And a well-crafted brand stands for something. So when we think about farmers markets brands, these are things that we think about a lot when we think about food and farming brands. They represent high quality food, fresh and healthy. They support the local economy, and they help people reconnect with where their food comes from and the people who make it and grow it. So there's this value around reconnecting with the land and understanding where your food comes from. I know I'm preaching to the choir today, but this is a brand value that probably resonates with your market. And markets as a central meeting point for people. So I know that this has been less and less, less through the pandemic, but we found lots of safe ways to gather and get together again. So that idea of being a third place for community, being a place that people can gather and can share, that food brings people together, but then it does so much more than that, right? Oh, it looks like our screen sharing just dropped off here. Let's give us a second to pop back on. Okay, here we go. Okay, everyone have that back on? Perfect, okay. So we just talked about your identity. So as we're developing a market brand, we want to think about developing the identity of the market. And there's a lot of great ways that you can go through that process, thinking about what that means. I'm going to show you some tools later in the toolkit that will help you at your market, if you're a market manager, facilitate decisions around what the market's identity or brand might look like, might sound like, and what values you have and what it might look like. And there's ways that you can design that solo, like if you're a vendor and you have your own product that you're creating or growing, then you can create your own brand. But if you have a market brand, you really want to create something that is a collective identity, that this visual, verbal, and experiential, all of these components are embodying collective values. So we'll show you some survey tools later that will help you figure that out. So we want to figure out who we are, but we also at the same time want to think about who our target audiences are. Who are the people that we're trying to build relationships with? Who are we trying to connect with? Who is our customer base? And who of that customer base is current? Like who are our current audiences that we know get us and connect with us? And then who are our target audiences? Who are the folks that might not be coming to our markets right now, but could be potential customers that with just a little bit more communication that we could reach to bring into our markets to have walk through the door. So that's how we think about building our customer base. Oh, okay. So then once we've identified who our target audiences are, what our core values are, and a little bit about who we are, once you've established your branding, then we start to think about marketing and the channels for communication. So each channel of communication is an opportunity to connect with your audience. These are different channels that you could market through. So, excuse me, there's in-person interactions. So if you're the representative of your market, every interaction that you have at your market represents your brand. So your brand values and the way that you want to be speaking to people should come through. Your products are an opportunity to communicate with your audiences about your brand, the quality of the products that you're selling at your market. Web, obviously, digital is a great channel to be communicating with your audiences, like your website, basically, social media, and also print. Those are all channels of communication, channels for marketing. And then once we've established this whole framework, we've built a really strong brand, we know who our audiences are, we've started to communicate our brand on multiple channels, then we have the opportunity to empower our audiences to reach new audiences in their own networks. So this is what we call building brand ambassadors. When people feel like they have an authentic connection to your brand, they'll help you share your message with new audiences. So a really powerful brand, when you've really done your job and you've connected to the people that you want to connect with, you'll start to hear them talking about using the words that the messaging and the words that you want, that you started to use in your brand to other people. So an example is we work with a salt farm in the Appalachian region, J.Q. Dickinson Saltworks. I'm going to show you that case study later. And they do hand harvested, solar dried salt from the Ippitus Ocean. It's one of the only salts in the world that comes from underneath the mountains and not from the ocean. And it's called J.Q. Dickinson Saltworks. And we started working with them in maybe 10 years ago. And today their salt is sold in every state in the country. And so when I go into a shop and I see J.Q. Dickinson salt, I always ask about the salt, and the shopkeeper tells me the story that I helped them write 10 years ago. They tell me about it's a 200-year-old family farm. It's hand harvested. It's solar dried. It's one of the only salts in the world that comes from underneath a mountain range. So that is a sign of success, that we've built what we call brand ambassadors to start telling our story for us. So for a farmer's market, that might be that you're at your local restaurant and you hear somebody, you overhear someone at the table next to you talking about your farmer's market, and they're using some of the language that that you thought through with your brand committee, or you thought through internally at your market. You said, this is how I wish that if I was a fly on the wall, what I would hear folks say about my market. So that's a sign of success, that you're starting to build sticky messaging and you're building brand ambassadors. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. I'm just going to go through some characteristics of strong branding here. So I've already talked about a lot of these, so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. So strong brands know who they are. I've been talking about values, developing core values for your brand. So strong underlying values inform all your decisions. You know who you want to reach. So we've talked a lot about audiences. You've thought through the community of people that you want to reach, what they love, what they need and value, and there's alignment. So that's an important thing that I might not have talked about earlier, that you want to make sure that you're building a collective identity for your market that aligns with the values of your target audiences as well. And your brand is a foundation that will endure through time. So you don't really want to create something that is trendy or of the moment. You want to think about it really, all the visuals and the verbals really embodying who you are and still being relevant to your market in 10 years. So a strong brand identity is a collective identity bigger than any one person. It's a foundation that has its own life and will sustain itself for years to come. So an example of a really strong brand that we've been fortunate enough to create and is the Ophma brand, the Oregon Farmers Market Association brand. And so we really tried to do a lot of these things in this process. We surveyed farmers market members and also farmers throughout the state, and we asked you all, I think maybe some of you participated in this, questions about what values are most important to you in Oregon agriculture. But also we asked you what are the colors that really speak to you when you think of Oregon farmers markets? What colors speak to you? What fruits and vegetables and produce and value add products are most important to you? So we literally took information from our collective group across Oregon, and we used all of that information to inform the design of this brand. So this whole color system comes from surveying and from talking with a lot of different farmers market managers and farmers across the state, and it's all informed by the colors of Oregon. The typography, we really wanted, one of the values of the Oregon Farmers Market Association was that we wanted it to feel contemporary and modern and forward thinking. And so, but also with a bit of nostalgia. So we wanted the past to connect with the future. So we picked typefaces that did that. And then the system, we really wanted it to feel joyful for people. We wanted people to be excited to come to association events, to come to talk about farming, that this would be uplifting and inspiring for folks. So when you get a piece of mail, even when you get something on a formal letterhead, we wanted it to feel fun and playful. So all of these values come through in a lot of this different branding with all of the different color combinations. And then it's distributed on multimedia. So this is the social campaign that we did. You can see how everything is consistent throughout. We're using the same color palette, the same illustrations, and the same type. We're just using them in different ways. And then you can think about, once you've established your brand, different materials that you can communicate your brand on. So here, I don't know if Ophma has done a mural yet, but we're really excited to one day see this. your brand can come to life in all kinds of different mediums. So digital is wonderful. And then you can think about what type of things you can, what type of objects might empower people to talk about the brand more, from small, tote bags and things that can be reusable, that reinforce your values of your market, that are small giveaways, and then larger things like a mural, which could be a great piece of signage. Social. So that's one case study that we like to talk about. It's also, there's more information on that case study online. We also, we want to create brands that inspire people. So your brand story is really, really important. And you want to think about how you tell that story as well, which we'll talk about a little bit more today. So I talked about J.Q. Dickens and Saltworks and that farm that we worked with. A lot of their storytelling is told visually through photography. So this is something that you could think about doing if you want, if the story of your market is all about people and people coming together, and that's one of your food brings people together, maybe that's one of your largest values of the people at your market, then you could host an event and hire a photographer and have them document all of those, interactions and experiences that are centered around food. And then that photography can be used for all of your different brand communication. That photography around people communicates that those interactions are most important to your market. So with J.Q. Dickens and Saltworks, we hosted this dinner for their family. It's a 200-year-old farm, and it basically was unfunctional. And their brother and sister came back and said, we want to start harvesting salt again. And so they first shared their salt with their family at this family dinner that we hosted. And then we brought photographers in just to document the evening. And then this imagery is, they've used this photography for 10 years to communicate their value system. So that photography from that dinner is used on their website. It's used in all of their marketing collateral. This is the packaging that we did for them. This is from that same day of that dinner, preparing for the dinner, actually harvesting the salt. So there's different ways that you can visualize your brand value system. And as you see, the Saltworks also keeps everything consistent throughout. So we have a few different case studies here, but I think I'll go through this one as well, and then I'm going to move over to the toolkit. So the last one I'll talk about is just you're self-aware. You've whittled down how to explain yourself in a few words that you can share over and over again with others, and then they can in turn share that. So that's sticky messaging that we talked about. So One Stripe Chai is a vendor, is a company in Oregon. And they have very simple logo, One Stripe Chai. It's used on everything, but then they have this really clever messaging throughout. It's haldi doodh. I actually don't even know how to say this for this drink. Chai me at home. So if you look at all of their products, you're going to see the repetition of messaging. And this is an Indian founder that is using a lot of language from her own place to reinforce her values and to share her culture. And if you look through, if you go visit her website or her Instagram, you'll see how strong her messaging is and how it really reinforces her core values throughout, and really shares, there she is, and really shares and brings to life her product in the experience that you're having with it. So Sisters Farmers Markets, I'm gonna actually stop here. We have a case study for this in the toolkit as well. This is an Oregon farmers market in Sisters, Oregon, and they do a really great job with consistency in their branding, using the green, using the same logo in all of their work. So we'll go through this today. So this whole presentation here is available for download for anyone that is an Oregon Farmers Market Association member on the toolkit. And there are some other case studies in here, work that we've done, work that we've seen in Oregon, and other food brands across the country that bring to life some of the different values, some of the different core tenets of branding.
Hey, Megan.
So, yeah.
There's a question in the chat about core values. Maybe you could say a little bit more maybe about how an idea, a value or idea of something ends up coming out in images. I think maybe that's what the question is getting at.
Okay, was there a specific case study?
Well, she just says, I'm not seeing any core values. So I think there's just some maybe wanting to have explained a little bit more about how you take an idea that maybe you form with words first and then make that show up in design.
Yeah, so an example would be, sometimes it's, I'm going to give you two examples. Sometimes it's really obvious. So with the Oregon Farmers Market Association, one of the core values is to lift up and celebrate all of the robust and diverse agricultural products, and that was it called value add products, right? That Oregon has to offer. And so if that is the core value, I mean, an opposite value, that might seem obvious that the Farmers Market Association wants to do that, but you could also say, okay, this Farmers Market Association really values food of the future and creating food in science laboratories. Okay, but that's not a value of the Oregon Farmers Market Association. The value is more centered around celebrating the food that comes from the land. And so the color palette is inspired by the land. So it directly communicates that value, that these colors are all, that they're literally eye dropped from photography of different flora and fauna and all of the things that inspired the markets in Oregon. So that's a very obvious direct correlation, but that's how visually that value is expressed. The Saltworks campaign, or the Saltworks brand that we talked about, one of their main values was family, and how bringing people together at the table creates so much more connectedness and helps families come together and move away from their differences. So family was a core value of that company. And so we documented their family coming together from 5 to 7 different states throughout the Appalachian region, and having a meal together and thinking about, how the salt was bringing them together. They serve salt all through the open salt containers rather than where you pinch it out and where you share it. So the experience that they talk about eating salt is all about sharing and creating interactions and exchange between people as well. So the visuals are the photography that document those interactions. In contrast, you could take a bunch of photos of portraits of people, which we do for some campaigns, but that doesn't communicate the interactions between people and the meaning between people, right? That communicates something different. So when you're intentional about the imagery that you're creating, from colors to photography to illustration, that's how it can reinforce the value system. Does that make sense? I'm not sure who asked that question. So if you have any follow-up questions, we can definitely talk about it.
Thanks, Megan.
I asked the question, and I did it when it was the chai. I was not able to grok their core values out of that. It was pretty, but I couldn't get a word out of that.
So I know less about that company. I'll be honest. I don't want to speak about her. I haven't read her brand value system, so I don't want to misrepresent. But for me, when I see that brand, Rebecca, it communicates to me that this person finds the culture that she comes from very important, and that that is a core value. Because a lot of people just, you can erase your culture, whether you're from South India or you're from the Appalachian region. So she has chosen to lift up her culture and to share that, and to actually use language in her branding and her communication and her packaging that that shares parts of her culture. So, it can be interpreted in different ways for different people. And I don't want to make assumptions about her values, but to me, that communicates a lot about what's important to her and what's important to the company. So.
Okay, I kind of took it the opposite way. I felt the culture that came through was pop culture, not her ancestors' culture. And, maybe it was a mixture of those things, but for me, the predominant message was pop culture. And that was a little jarring, but that's just how it struck me.
Okay, yeah. Well, maybe probably the best thing to do would be to invite her to the next conversation and ask her intentions, because I would be interested to ask her. But I hear what you're saying, and you're bringing up a really interesting point, that when we talked about building an identity, and then we also talked about your audiences, and so potentially. So I'm interpreting it their branding and their identity and differently than you're interpreting it right now. And so, maybe one of us is not the target audience, or we're not always going to be able to create something that communicates the same thing to everyone, because we as audiences have our subjectivity as well. But I hear what you're saying. Yeah. So I could discuss this more, but I think I'm really excited to share the toolkit with you all. So would you mind if we step into this? And I'm going to share this toolkit, and then we can do some more Q&A. We'll take a little break, and then we'll go into an exercise. So see if I can share this window over here. Okay. All right. So very excited to share with you all today. This just went live this morning, the launch of the Ophma Resource Library Brand and Marketing Toolkit. So as we mentioned earlier, this is the first release of a 3-year set of tools that we'll be sharing, educational tools on brand and marketing. And I believe that Ophma is also doing a lot of different toolkits that you'll also be seeing pop up in the coming months in the resources section of the Ophma website. So really excited to share this with you all. I'm going to scroll through and give kind of a demo to give an overview, some of the principles that we just talked about here when I went over an introduction to brand and marketing. Are communicated, but there's also a lot of extra goodies here.
Yeah.
Sorry? Does someone have a question? Okay.
I think someone
So, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
Okay, great. So, so if you go to the Oregon Farmers Market website, you can go to the navigation here, and you go to resources, and at the bottom right now, this is where you'll find the brand and marketing toolkit overview. So if you click on this link here, it'll take you to this page that we're already on, the brand and marketing toolkit. So right now we have our first 3 chapters available that we're going to go through today. These are jump links to them. So the first chapter that we're releasing today is the Brand and Marketing 101 chapter. Just like you have a unique personality, the way you look, talk, and experience the world, your farmer's market has the same. When we're referring to a business's personality, we call it their brand. A brand is your market's identity, the unique combination of your looks, your market culture, your ideals and values, and your reputation. So we're going to go look at that in a second, but I'm going to just overview these chapters here. The second chapter that we have accessible to you, or the second set of tools, is the brand strategy and development. So the first one is introducing branding, and then this gets into starting to think about, okay, how do you define your core values? And then how do you link up visuals and develop messaging that actually exemplifies those, per the conversation that we were just having. And third, today, we're releasing the owned, earned, and paid media toolkit. So this is really thinking about, once you've established a strong brand, how, and we think of branding as owned media, actually. So once you've established your owned media, how do you start thinking about how to market and do outreach for earned and paid media? So we're going to go over that a little bit in this demo here. And then these are the new chapters, a sneak peek to come in the coming years. So in 2023, we'll be releasing print, signage, and environmental graphics, printed giveaways and goodies at your market, and how to work with vendors on those. And then in the following year, digital, managing your online presence. And specifically, we're going to do a whole section on social media. So as we're developing out these tools, we have free downloads on these pages, and we're going to start aggregating those on a library for branded marketing of all of your free downloads. So I think we have like 6 to 9 free downloads right now. We'll be adding those to this section in the coming weeks, and then we'll be building this out over time. So really excited to share this with you all. I'm going to jump into the first section here. Brand and Marketing 101. Okay, so you can access this section through the brand and marketing page, the toolkit. And so we go to this page here and just have a little bit of an overview, which we already know, we've learned today, or we might have already known. And then this is just an overview of what you can find in this chapter. And so then we have some reading, some writing, and some hands-on activities that you can both do solo, or you can bring back to your board or your brand. Maybe you have a brand committee. There's a lot of different options here of how you can go about this process if you want to consider this for your market. So first, we're just defining branding and marketing, which we've talked about today. We spent a lot of time talking about brand, but what is marketing? Marketing is the way that you use your brand to communicate with current and potential customers so that they'll visit and spend money at your farmers market. So that's when we were looking at all the channels earlier. Marketing are all the channels that you can communicate with your audiences through. Each section here has a case study. So we talked a little bit about the Sisters Farmers Market and how well they use their brand color and their logo to be consistent and to reinforce their brand. So we talk a little bit about that in here, and then we have some images that you can explore more on the Sisters Farmers Market. So they are always using their same green color, their same logo, and their same typography across medium. So, you know, building a large brand like the Ophma brand can take a lot of work, and it's great to bring in an outside vendor. If you are working on a smaller budget, or you can only, maybe you're going to create something in-house at your market that you really just need like one consistent, very simple brand, this is a great way to do it. They have a really strong hand-drawn logo. It communicates to me that the elements that using your hands is really important to them. This is a hand-drawn logo. It tells me that getting their hands dirty is important. There's the green heart here, which communicates just coming together and love. Obviously, we all know what a heart symbolizes, but they use the same green heart everywhere. So when I see this brand, if I was walking down the street, I would know what this brand was. So that they build recognition really well with a very simple brand visual system. So moving down the toolkit, you know, we've talked a lot about branding today and marketing, but how can you start to apply this at your farmers market? So here's a little information on planning for your brand and how to do this with groups of people. So ideally, this is a team effort. You can start small by brainstorming the people that you can gather to support you in developing branding and marketing. You can think of star vendors who've worked by your side and know all the ins and outs of the market, volunteers. So you really want to think about who are the stakeholders of your market, not just maybe within your market, but other people that really care, like volunteers or even customers. And you want all of them to have input on this collective identity that you're building. And then here's your first download here. So, excuse me, you can do this exercise. I'm going to click on it here. Let's see what my team has dropped in here. Great. Okay. So find your brand strengths, values, and personality. So once you've gathered your team, you can actually do this exercise collaboratively in person. You can do it individually and then ask everyone to submit their own worksheets. Or if you're doing a brand solo, you can go through this process. I would like to go through this process with you all today if we have time to do that. It's a really great first step. We really like to think about what the strengths, the assets, and the values of any brand that we're creating are before we start to choose color and type and all of the visual elements as we were talking about earlier. So this is a really great free tool that we've added, that we use this in our process for tons of different brands over the last 10 years. And it's always a game changer to start with that, with making those decisions. And then we have a lot of tools and resources at the bottom here. So build your visual identity, define a brand personality, and survey your community. So I'm going to actually just click on define a brand personality here. So sometimes these tools are resources, information that we use a lot or we share within our team that we're sharing with you. So this is an article about your brand personality. Survey your community. So this is a survey that we've built a similar toolkit for the West Virginia Farmers Market Association years ago, and a lot of these tools are based off of the West Virginia Farmers Market tools that we've created, this being one of them here. And they've so graciously offered their permission for us to be able to use these tools as well. So this is a survey that you can share with your community. You can turn this into a Google form, or you can also use SurveyMonkey. And we used a version of this in the Ophma branding process as well. So this helps us start to think about who our demographic is and then what is important to them. So that's your community survey. And then last but not least, so once we've established our core values, we've gotten buy-in from our community and input from our community, we can start to think about the visuals and how to develop those. So this is a visioning exercise that we do with a lot of different clients of ours, and that we've put together for you to be able to do on your own. So what are 2 to 3 colors that embody the brand and brand values? And then we just give you a little bit of information about color psychology here. This is also something that you can research online. All color has meaning and relates to people and makes people feel different ways. Like red is used in a lot of food branding because it makes people feel hungry. So there's a lot of really interesting color psychology, if you're interested in it, that you can explore. But we've just included some information on that here. So this is how you would start to think about, how does color communicate the values of my brand and of my community? Or maybe you want to go with a more neutral palette. Then you can also think about color as dark and saturated, or lighted and muted. Those really mean different things. So then we ask the question again, what are those colors that embody your brand? So this is an exercise that you can go through individually again, and or with a group of people, with a brand committee, with your community. We do a lot of participatory workshops for clients where we invite stakeholders from throughout the community to come in and talk about color. And we worked in the Bronx with the Bronx Bodega Alliance. It was an alliance of 150 bodegas, and they wanted to, it's one of the largest food deserts in the country, and they wanted to be able to bring young people in to get more healthy food in the bodegas. So their plan was to be featuring more farm fresh food in bodegas throughout the Bronx. And so we did a series of participatory workshops with teenagers throughout the Bronx, because I'm from Appalachia, so I'm not really going to know, it doesn't make sense for me to be the author and to make decisions around how I'm going to convince a bunch of young people to go to bodegas in the Bronx and buy fresh food. So we worked with a bunch of different kids and we asked them these questions, and they really designed the campaign and they served as our art directors. So there's a lot of value in asking community what they want. So you can definitely do this with your market, but you could also host a community event and have a bunch of food and then have people ask these questions. So we talk about color in here. We also give you some information about fonts and how to decide what different fonts communicate. We called out some great fonts for folks to consider, and then just giving you some language around them. Talk about personality of the fonts a little bit. And then we also talk about materials in here. So this is a great tool for you to use either within a group of the market or with your community. So all of these are accessible on the Brand Marketing 101 page. We also have some FAQs. If some FAQs come out of this workshop today, we can add those in here. We'd be happy to do that. These are some questions that we hear often or that our friends at Ophma have heard that asked us to answer. Okay, so then we have these two other chapters. So I'm going to go over a little bit with my half hour here, since we did a little Q&A before. I'm going to go through brand strategy development and owned, earned, and paid media as well. So you can access this from the main page of the toolkit, or at the bottom of every page, you can access other chapters. So we're going to go to the second chapter, brand strategy and development. So excuse me, in this chapter here, we have an overview of what brand strategy and development is. And we've really talked about this pretty extensively today, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but time spent developing your brand, talking to your community, building buy-in is really where it's at. And that work is going to pay off in dividends rather than just creating a fun logo. You really want the brand and the logo and the brand to be reflective of the group of people that you're serving. We have the case study in here, the Oregon Farmers Market case study that we were able to talk about already today. So you can read more about that here. And then we get into co-branding, which we haven't talked about yet. So this is a question that our friends at Ophma shared that they receive a lot, how to navigate brand relationships. So there's a little information here on brand relationships. How do I navigate creating a brand for my farmers market, integrating vendor brands, and including the Ophma brand? So we've explained that here a little bit. You can read more about it. And I think that I'm just going to hop on over. Let's see. I'm going to hop on over back to the Brand and Marketing Toolkit overview. And I think this image is a really great example of how to navigate brand relationships that we've created. So you have your farmers market brand, your farmers market name. That's the primary brand if you're a market manager that you always want to be putting forward. Ophma, the Ophma brand, you can think of that as kind of like a seal of approval, or like a certificate in some way, just to show that you have that relationship. And it communicates that you're in relation, you're in community with other markets throughout the state. So having, technically, you would want the Ophma brand to just be taking up like 10 to 20% of space if you were pairing it with your market logo. And then your vendor table, and in a relationship like this is all about your vendor table. So it might want to take up the most space. But if you have a layout, maybe it's the bottom of a poster, or maybe you want to show your collective or your community of vendors, you want your farmers market logo to be the first thing that folks see. And then you can show all your vendor logos a lot smaller. Maybe there's a combination of 10 to 30 vendor logos, and they are like each 5% compared to your logo that's 100%. So that's all explained in a little bit more detail in this section. And the way you can think about it is a way to simplify it is just to put it into a sentence, the relationship between the different brands. So if you just think of brands as people, like we talked about, and then you just put together a sentence. Let's see, where is it here? So to help you wrap your head around the relationship, just try explaining to yourself or your committee, the relationship in a sentence. So our market is a member of Ophma, a statewide association, and hosts a collective of many different vendors. So therefore, our market brand is a member of the Ophma brand, and our market hosts a collective of many different vendor brands. So that articulates the relationship. And then if you actually have a bunch of logos together, if that's what you're trying to figure out, this explains kind of how to think about that kind of layout. So the biggest thing to take away here is that if you're representing the market, if you have signage for your market, you really want to push that brand forward, because your vendors might come and go over time and change. But you want people to know your market first. So, okay. And then if you have questions about that, when we open it up to Q&A, we can talk about it more. So in this section, we also have some tools and resources for you to download. So we have this visioning exercise. Oh, we looked at that earlier. We have this information about a brand style guide that you can check out. This is an example from MailChimp about their styling guide. So here's writing goals and principles, voice and tone, how to write about MailChimp. This is pretty extensive, but it talks about all the different ways to communicate the MailChimp brand. So it's a great example of a pretty robust style guide. And here we're just sharing an article about vendor support. So branding your farm business. This is a great article from Penn State Extension. Free guide from Penn State Extension was created with farmers in mind. Pass it on to farm businesses to support them in building their brands. So this is a resource that we've shared with different markets throughout the country, and hopefully that that will help you in thinking about the relationship of brands. Okay, and then we have this exercise here, brand color, typography, and materials. I think we shared this, we went over this already. And then we have FAQs as well. So we even have here, should we pay a firm or a creative agency to do this work for us, or should we do it alone? So we just have some information here about having a subject matter expert work with you and how that's great. But if you don't have a budget, you can also actually partner with subject matter experts. There's not every agency or studio does this, but we partner with a lot of our clients over the years to actually apply for grant funding for them to brand. So we work with vendors, specific farms, as well as farmers markets, as well as associations branding. And there are ways that you can apply for funding together to do that. If you don't want to go that route, you can use the tools in this toolkit here to walk you through the process. And making a committee in-house would be a great way to get started with that, which we explain in here more. Okay, so I'm going to go into the last section here, own, earned, and paid media. Okay, so once you've established a strong brand and you know who your target audiences are, then you want to start thinking about how that brand is being communicated in different media. So traditionally, when people thought about marketing, you thought about paid media. You paid to run a commercial. You paid to put together print flyers. But there are other types of media that you don't have to pay for, and owned and earned media have become more and more important with social media. So you have the opportunity to build a strong brand yourself that you own, and then to earn your customers and different media outlets support for them to become your ambassadors and tell your story for you. So we go over a little bit of what owned, earned, and paid media is in here. In a nutshell, owned media, you own how the information is put out into the world. Earned media, you ask others to put the information out for you, and paid media, you pay others to put the information out for you. So that's in a nutshell. On this section of the toolkit, we actually have this in 3 steps. So we'd always start with building your owned media first. This talks about, some ways to do that. We even have some recommendations on basic websites for you to get started with. Squarespace is a great platform to build your own website. Your website would be like your digital brick and mortar. That would be considered owned media. And MailChimp is really great for email communication. Once you've built that strong owned media, then you can start to think about earned media. So earned media, the most commonly used earned media strategy for farmers markets is to work to get free press coverage about the market, a vendor, and event or a program. Radio stations, newspapers, TV stations, and even popular social media accounts can be sources of earned media. This marketing strategy is valuable to farmers markets because it's a no-cost way to reach a wide audience within your community and to promote your market. So earned media is press in the traditional sense, but it's also anytime that someone shares a story online. If you're using Instagram and you have reels or stories and you see that other folks are sharing that content, then that's earned media. You're earning someone's taking the time to amplify or to share your story. So earned media is really where it's at. Once you've built a great brand, then if you're doing a good job with your branding and people believe in what you're doing, and you're really telling the heart of the story, then you're going to earn people's trust and therefore earn them sharing and amplifying the stories of your market. And then third is paid media. So you can reach new audiences with paid media. And paid media is anytime you're paying for promotion, basically, right? So the most common way to do that digitally is you can do paid ads, but you can also, if anyone here is active on social media, you can boost posts, and that's considered paid media. So I'll just go through this here. Where do people in your community who are likely to shop at your market go for the latest information and news? If you choose to invest dollars into advertising, make sure that the audience you want to reach is getting their information through that platform. A lower cost way to reach new audiences with paid advertising is to put small amounts of money behind your social media posts to ensure they're reaching larger numbers of people. When you advertise using social media, there's also a greater likelihood that the people you're reaching will become part of your owned audience. For example, people who see your boosted posts on Facebook may decide to follow your Facebook page. So you're able to convert paid media to new followers and to new people that are part of your community in digital, better than if you were just to buy like a magazine article or a magazine advertisement somewhere. So if you have the budget to start spending on a lot of advertising everywhere, you just want to be intentional about where that advertising is going, making sure that your brand is coming through, making sure that it's pushing back to places where you have really strong earned media. So by pushing back to, I mean that if you do an ad in a magazine, you want to have a very strong call to action, like come to our market on these days, or visit our, follow us on Instagram at this account here, so that folks, that's pushing back to owned media, and that you're able to convert to followers, or you're able to bring people. We think about it as like engaging people and bringing them into your digital community. So we've taught all of these tools kind of overlap and fall together, but we've talked a lot about target audiences today. Here's an exercise. Let's see what is in here. Yeah, here's an exercise on defining your target audience. So even though I'm going over this as the third chapter, this is a great exercise to do really right in the beginning, to define your core values and who you are, and then define who your target audiences are. And with this information, then go into the visual and verbal development. So, oh, this is the survey. Yep, and then we have some additional tools here, including some tips on media outreach, an article on how to do research around owned and earned media and paid media, and then the survey that we've looked at. So I am a little bit over 4 o'clock today, and I have about 25 minutes left. I was going to take a quick break, maybe like a 2-minute break here, and then open this up to Q&A and potentially an exercise. So if you all don't mind, I'll just take a minute here. And if you want to start, if you have questions, if you want to start gathering those and putting those in the chat, we can open this up for some questions about all of the great stuff that we've been able to share with you today. So I had a break slide, but I don't know where it is. So I will be right back.
Thanks, Megan.
Hey folks, I'm hopping back on here. I'm not sure if you all took a break, but if you're hearing me, if you want to mosey back on over, we've got about 20 minutes left of time. Sometimes when I facilitate workshops, I force everyone now to do a quick stretch before we go into the next phase. So I don't know, I don't see a lot of cameras on here, but if anybody wants to stretch, I think I'm frozen now stretching. That's embarrassing. So there we go. I see some stretching cameras on. Love the stretching dog. Yeah, it's a lot to sit at a computer for 90 minutes. So, but happy to have a new tool like this to connect with so many different faces. So we've got about 20 minutes left. Who here has any questions about some of the things that we've gone over today? I don't see any questions in the chat. So if we want, we can open up the last 20 minutes here for discussion. It seems like we have a smaller group here right now, or we can go through the strengths and assets and core value development exercise, which was the plan. So does anyone have any questions before we could at least get started with that? Okay, Leslie Dickinson, I see your hand up there.
Hi, Megan. I am really new at being a market manager. And I think our branding is pretty sporadic at this point. So my question is, what would be the first thing I would start with?
Do you have a logo?
Yes.
Do you have a market name?
Yes.
Do you have a board?
Do we have a board?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing you might want to start with, you could start a few different ways. You could gather your board together and you could do this workshop, this worksheet that you could send this to your board ahead of time, actually, and you could go through this exercise with them, either in person or digitally. And I think this would be a great first step to just thinking about, to getting everyone on the same page and asking folks. It's really great to ask everyone, ask a group of people, your stakeholders, their input from the get-go, so they feel like they're part of the process. And it helps later on if you're trying to rebrand or update your branding or systemize your branding, to have buy-in, to have everyone be able to use it. So this is a great exercise to get started with. Another thing that you can do if you have a less engaged board is you can go through this exercise yourself, or you can send a survey out to your community. You can use SurveyMonkey, or we also recommend Google Forms. It's free to use Google Forms. So you could turn this into a survey if you wanted to do that, and you could send it to more folks on your board. Or you could fill this out yourself. And then the other thing I would recommend is if you are thinking about this, you could start, some clients, we have them put together a pin board on Pinterest or some type of like collage of different imagery that inspires them around their brand. So that can be anything from actual branding and logos and package design to just things in Oregon that you love, that reinforce some of the values that you're listing here. That visual exploration can also be done with your community as well. So you could gather people together and you could ask these questions, and then you could have a bunch of magazines, and people can cut out different things from the magazines to start to pull visuals together that don't have to do anything with branding or packaging. They can be visuals that You know, they could be an image of a leaf or an image of a bunch of hands coming together that reinforce whatever the values are. So that's where I would start. Does anyone else have any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have one from Melissa in the chat. Melissa, do you want to say what your question is, or I can read it for you?
Sure. So what's going on is the Coos Bay Downtown Farmers Market is part of a small part of the Coos Bay Downtown Association. Now, the Coos Bay Downtown Association is going through a rebranding. They're looking at changing their logo, that kind of thing. So because we're part of them, should I wait until they are totally done before starting to update and change our stuff because we are part of them? Or is there pieces that I can start and get ready now so we're not, you know, waiting to the last minute per se?
Does your brand have to relate to the Coos Bay Downtown Association?
Yes and no. Our current branding is a basket, and in the center of the basket is their old logo. Now, my thing with the basket is it only has like 4 fruits in it. It doesn't really represent the market as a whole. It doesn't have, or excuse me, 4 vegetables. It has no fruits in it. We have a full food court. We have arts and crafters. I mean, there's a lot of other things besides just the few pieces of vegetables that they have in this basket. So I want to keep the, you know, the basket idea because everyone knows the basket, but kind of change it up a little bit. And depending on what logo they put that, you know, in the center, similar to the old basket, or do I need to just wait and hold off until we get more info from them? The other thing, their color palette they're currently looking at is red, white, and blue, which isn't really farmers market friendly. So that's why I'm not really sure if I should wait and then look at it or how we should do it.
I think if your brand is related so closely to the Coos Bay Downtown Association branding, that it makes sense to either wait or to just have a conversation with them about the brand relationship. You know, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Do you need to, is it important, like if you go through this exercise here that somehow popped off my screen, let's get that back up. If you go through this exercise, do you have a board or a brand committee or anything like that?
We do have a board. It is the Coos Bay Downtown Association board. The Coos Downtown Association runs all the festivals and that kind of thing. And the farmers market started out very small as kind of a festivity piece with them and has grown into a full market. So we're still part of the Downtown Association, but we're a little bit separate too. It's kind of a strange situation right now.
Well, I think that what might be helpful is actually the same thing that I recommended to I think it was Leslie, that you go through this exercise with your board, that you facilitate this exercise and think through, ask the question, how related do you want to be to that brand? So what are your values? And I don't know if the second exercise would be to go through the target audience exercise. And who are your values? Who are you all? And who are you trying to reach? And then ask yourselves the question, does it make sense that we're still related to the Coos Bay Downtown Association? Or do we want to move away from that and create our own brand? Because that's no longer serving, you know, who we are and who we want to communicate and who we want to reach. So I think asking those 2 questions first to your group and then revisiting the question you're asking me, you know, do we do it now or do we do it later? It's really, does the farmers market need to be associated with the Coos Bay Downtown Association, or can it be separate? So that's the ultimate question. And I think through going through these 2 exercises, you would be able to you'd have a lot of information to start to answer that question for yourselves.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I did see somebody else had a question right as you were starting to ask that, Melissa. Was there one other person here? Rebecca? Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Rebecca. You might be on mute.
I'm going to try to phrase my question so it's not just about us, but I'm hoping that something about my situation fits other people's situation. The part that doesn't is that I have 2 different logos for 2 cities, and we've made them harmonized. So I feel like I have 2 brands that are well harmonized, and we've put a lot of work into that. But my website, I guess saying it's in hospice is about the nicest thing that I could say. We've had to just let that go during the pandemic, and we're coming back to that now. So what maybe you could speak to is like, what do you do with clients who have pieces and parts that are good and that they want to keep, like a logo, which is fundamental to brand, but isn't the whole of brand. And yet there are things that aren't right, that aren't where they should be. How do you just start with the exercises anyway?
I think if you don't know what your core values are and what your strengths are, that establishing those will help you make all the other decisions. So it's kind of the same answer to Melissa, that going through this exercise and thinking through establishing some shared language around what your goals are will help you make those decisions. In the instance that you're talking about, another part of the question is it's all a process, and it is kind of linear, and there are steps. So you start off with your developing a shared understanding of goals and core values and strengths. And then you look at your messaging and you think about how you turn that into messaging. And then you start to visualize that. So if you have a really strong logo, you might want to just go back and refresh those first 2 steps of who you are, who your core values are. Sorry, I forgot this, but your target audience and then your messaging. Those 3 pieces could be revisited. And then you could look at your logo and say, are our 2 logos still communicating these things? Yes, great. Okay, so let's move forward to the next step, colors and typography. Let's pick a brand font if we don't have that, and let's just start using that font everywhere. And let's pick 2 to 4 colors, and let's use those colors everywhere. And then next step, let's think about how to distribute these on our channels. So that would be your website. So now you have your, you know who you are, your core values, you know who you want to reach, you have your core messaging, you've got your logo, you've got your colors, you've got your typography. So you've developed these core tenets of your brand. And now you want to think about how to use those to refresh your website or a different distribution channel. So that should make redesigning your website or updating your website actually really easy, because you're like, here's the color palette, here's the type, here's the logos, here's what's important to us, here's who we're trying to reach. So all of that information should make for updating to a really easy web process. And you could hire someone out to do that, but you could also go to squarespace.com, find a layout, and you could then watch a few tutorials and then upload all of those things. Those are the ingredients that you need to make a good website, good print materials. All of the different distribution channels will be informed by those initial core foundational pieces of your brand. So are there any other questions we have here? I didn't see any others. We've only got about 5 minutes left, but I think those were really good questions rather than going through this one tool, because I think you all will be able to go through this tool, and you should probably spend a little bit more time thinking through these exercises. So we would just be spending a lot of time in silence today as you're applying this here.
One
Just wanted to throw in also referencing back to the workshop we did last month with Aorta, and about market models and the types of how I think these 2 things go together really well, and helps you think about how is your market communicating your values around diversity, equity, inclusion, and what type of market model you have, and if that market model is referencing the right values that you feel like and getting all of this up to date and communicating it through your brand and the stories and what you're telling out there. So I would look at Megan's this activity that Mesh is putting up on our website for you, and I go back and look at the workshop from last month and put those two things together for food for thought.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So I'm really excited to have you all dig into the toolkit that we created. I'm gonna stop the screen share here and to hear how these exercises go. There's lots of ways for you to do them, and it kind of depends on how you like to do your job as a market manager. But I'm hoping that you'll be able to provide feedback to Ophma, and that we'll hear that feedback, and that we'll be able to evolve and grow the toolkit to respond to your needs and your questions, so that this can be really, these tools can be living tools that are actually helping you do your job at the end of the day. Yeah, is anyone here